Here's a place where all of us can be safe. Our stories of transformation can be safe, and all the things we want to research are safe here. This is Safe Space with Cheyenne. I'm really excited you're here, and I hope you stick around for a while, because I've got a lot to show you before I leave Earth. I love you guys.
Welcome back, all my friends. Thanks for joining us for another episode. Today I have brought on Reneau Peurifoy. Well, he's an author of a lot of inspirational books for anxiety and stress management. Today he's going to come on and talk to us about a book called Why You Feel the Way You Do. He has an intriguing therapy background with some modalities that he's going to present to us. But right now we're just going to welcome into the show and see how your day's going.
Oh, it's been going great. So it's just a delight to be here. So
I'm really excited about that. I appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your many talents of helping people over the years. My first question is, when did you want to start publishing to help people during your times in being a therapist?
Well, when I first started in private practice, I started specializing in anxiety disorders. And I went down to LA and got some training with a group that was kind of pioneering some new stuff, and came back, realized that more needed to be done. So I just started kind of assembling a program, and it was actually a mail order program. People would get a tape once a week and a little lesson, and it was like 8 weeks long. And so I decided, well, it would be a lot easier just to put all this in a book. And so that's what I did, is I put it in a book, and the rest is history, as they say.
The rest is history. So was your first book self-published, or did you go through a publisher?
Well, actually, it went through, I self-published it. It's kind of interesting because I sent out got about 50 rejects from different publishers. Mm-hmm. And so half of them said the book was too specialized, and the other half said it was too general, which means that I was an unknown author, didn't have any big connections. And so, that was the real reason. So I self-published it. I got on radio. I sold 50,000 of them. And so that's when Warner Books decided they wanted to pick it up. They're now Hachette. Because when you sell a book, or when you're trying to sell a book, there's two places where it gets killed. First would be the editor. Is it a good book? And the editor may just think it's the best book in the world. Next thing they do is they send it to marketing. And of course, if the marketing says, I don't think this thing's going to market, then it gets killed there. And in my case, since I was not connected to, UCLA University or anything like that, they figured, well, he doesn't have any connections, so it's not going to sell. So after I showed them that it could sell, then they picked it up. And that's basically how it got started.
That's kind of a good underdog story, too, because I know so many people wanting to go into the publishing industry, and no matter what they're publishing, they're always terrified of that rejection, of just being like, oh, your work doesn't matter. We're not going to partner with you.
Right. Another kind of interesting thing about the first book is I had a paper route for 7 years. And during that time, I saved up enough money to buy some Kruger Rands. And so I bought those, and then I cashed those in. They were like $3,000. And by the time I cashed them in, they got up to about $5,000. And that's what I used to publish my first book, was my paper route money.
That's amazing, though. I love that. I have one small poetry book that's self-published through a platform. It's called Poetizer.
Right.
And I just wanted to throw it out in the world, and the success for me was being able to have the guts to publish it in the first place.
Right.
So I love that you have been able to not only start from the self-publishing, this would be easier to send it off to people, but you've built off of it, and you've continued to publish things over time, specializing again in anxiety and stress. Your times when you were, I don't want to say that you're not a therapist anymore, but didn't you specialize in marriage and family therapy as well?
Well, my licensing was as a marriage family therapist, but I specialized in anxiety disorders. And so when I first started, panic disorder was the big thing that I worked with. And at that time, it was brand new. Nowadays, everybody's doing panic disorder. And it was something that most of the people I saw, they'd been experiencing it for many years. And so it was kind of really entrenched in their life in a lot of different areas. And by the time I retired, it was nice because I saw people where their first panic attack was 3 months ago, and that was like a piece of cake. Easy to deal with that because all the other things that go along with it had it entrenched into their life. And I was the first person actually through that book and my program to actually do what they call the multimodal program approach, because you would go to the seminars over at the American Anxiety Disorder Association of America, and you'd have your three general schools: your cognitive behavioral people, your your cognitive people, your behavioral, and then your psychodynamic. Nowadays, that all kind of gets put together. And so the psychodynamic, that's kind of the Freudian, the deep unconscious stuff. They'd get up and they'd do a presentation, and then all the behaviorists and the cognitive people would laugh and throw spitwads at him. And then the cognitive person would get up, he'd give his presentation. The other two groups, they would do that. And, there was a lot of competition, and there was the one shoe fits all approach. And, I said, no, you shotgun it, because for a particular person, the combination of things that will work for them will be different from the combination that'll work for another person. And that's, it's nice to see that that's now more of a general approach that people take. They don't try to shove everybody into just one modality and make them fit that when that really is not their personality or their style.
I love that you said that. There was a question that popped up while you were saying that. So, okay, I'm picturing you just like, not even with a family, but maybe like a couple. You had just met them, you're getting to know them to figure out what direction we're really going to take. So what are the first indicators that you find in your clients to even know which modality to really go by? Are there like bulletin points in your head that you study for each person?
And most people I worked with were individuals. When I first started practice, and this is good for anybody who wants to get into any field, I looked around and I said, okay, who are two people that are very successful, in private practice? And so I got two names, and I took them to lunch. I said, hey, let me take you to lunch. And I said, okay, tell me what I can do to be like you. And I find that's a good approach. I've recommended that to other people who are in different types of, endeavors. And you usually get really good advice because, a lot of times you're hanging around with people that haven't succeeded. And so you want to go to somebody who's very successful. And one of the things they said is you want to get out there and do a lot of presentations. And don't pass out your little card because that'll get thrown away. Give them a piece of paper with something useful on it that they're going to want to keep. So that's what I did. I started doing lots of workshops about anxiety and stress. And it takes about 2 years to do that, and then you build your practice, and then pretty soon I got known to be the anxiety guy in my area. So I always like to say anxiety's been good to me. So
anxiety's been good to me. I mean, it's probably job security in this world, right?
Oh yeah, that's a whole big subject in itself.
For sure. Well, we'll definitely stay away from that one and veer back over to the book.
But you ask about how I approach it, and usually what I would do is I would take an intake, and I still do that if I see somebody like a church or something, and I find out, okay, what were the adults in their life like, a mom, dad, or substitutes, aunts, uncles, whoever raised them. And I tell them, give me a brief description as if you're watching a movie, right? So I get a picture of who these adults were that influenced them. And then I take 3 early recollections. Grade school, because that's when a lot of your concepts about, am I okay, am I not okay, do I have power, do I not have power, come into play. Then middle school, because that's when the train goes off the tracks a lot of times, with all that, adolescent hormonal stuff, that peer pressure and everything else that takes place in middle school.
Everything coming at you at one time. Mom's not there to defend you.
And you're separating, yet you don't want to separate, all that other stuff. And then of course, high school and anything significant in the adult world. And from that, I get a pretty good picture of what the issues are for the person, what's driving them, what I call core response patterns. And then I would just start making some guesses. I would guess that this or this is true for you. They would think I'm a prophet, right? But it's just right there if you know how to read it. People are actually very, very simple to read once you understand their background and where they're coming from. Sometimes very irrational, but that's just what it is.
Does intuition play a part with any of the work that you do, since it is so deep in science?
Well, I think it does. I was an unusual therapist because my original degree was in biology with math and chemistry minors. As a kid, I was always interested in animal behavior. My parents came from farms. We had a fairly large plot of land, so we raised chickens and rabbits and all kinds of different stuff. And I would train the chickens to stand on little boxes, and dogs and stuff. And so animal behavior, even through high school, just fascinated me. There was a guy named Conrad Lorenz, who was one of the early entheologists, which is just a study of animal behavior. And he first identified imprinting, how a little baby chick or a seagull will find a certain call note or spot or something, and then that imprints as mom. And a lot of early that type of work. So that just intrigued me. And so I've always been interested in animal behavior. Then I had a friend who was a therapist, and I said, gee, I've always liked working with people and teaching. So that got me interested in doing that. And, the rest of us just kind of followed after that. I often joke that, switching from animal behavior to human behavior is kind of a step down, but, they're fun to work with.
Yeah, they're fun to work with, and they're just so full of love all the time. I mean, even if they have anxiety, I know that. I have 2 dogs that help me anytime I feel like I'm going a little crazy. I'm like, get over here, you big tub of love. I know you got a big old heart beating for me.
That's one of the things that in my research for this new book, I just found really fascinating, because last century, 80s, 90s, even up to there, a lot of psychologists said animals don't have emotions. They're just conditioned response things. And the affective neurobiology that really got underway in the 90s and took off, after 2000, has identified core emotional circuits that are identical in all mammals. So a lot of these circuits you have are the same thing that your pets have. And so they definitely have emotions. And of course, any pet owner or anybody who's hung around animals for any length of time knows that.
I was reading a book, and this could be contradictory to any belief that you ever have, but since you brought it up, I definitely want to present it to you. It is in Dolores Cannon's book, Between Life and Death, and there's an excerpt where someone is talking about animals and like if they go to heaven and what really makes an animal personality almost. And they were saying that they don't have their own individual soul like humans, they have group souls. And in the group souls, it's not that they're like embedded with a personality that eventually will show on a human. It's the love, the affection, and the attention that you give to the animal that ultimately builds their personality. Is that something that you can speak about?
We're getting into the metaphysical, religious side of things and your beliefs. I definitely believe there's life after death. A lot of people, especially in our current culture, are very materialistic. When you die, you die. And so it's all about just, what I want, what I decide is right and wrong, because it doesn't really matter, because we're just a bunch of little, machines running around, And I find people who seriously will look at some of the near-death experience research that's gone on. A guy in the, I think it was the 70s, Moody, he's the first one that started researching near-death experiences. And it's taken off. There's a national organization. They got thousands of them. And they're all very... can we pause for just a minute? The gardener
recording
just came,
stopped.
And I...
All right, you are good to go.
Recording in progress.
We were talking about animals and do they have a soulish quality to them? And I don't think anybody knows for sure. I think with people, one of the things to consider is some of the near-death experience research that's been taking place since the 70s or 80s. And if you look into it, it's really fascinating. Because people have experiences where they describe things going on in the operating room, outside of the operating room, miles away. And oftentimes, or not all the time, but oftentimes it gets confirmed. And so even a major study that took place looking at this type of stuff concluded that, you can't explain this through some of the stuff that a lot of people have tried to brush it away. It's the dying brain, the chemical, because the brain is basically dead when a lot of people have these things. There's no electrical activity. No heartbeat. And sometimes in the case where they're submerged underwater, cold water, something of that nature, it's been a very prolonged period of time that they have these experiences. So for me, it tells me that there's more to life than just the physical part. And of course, that gets into one of the things I talk about in the book about what makes a person happy, and that's meaning. And what is your answer for why I'm here and what life is all about? And you mentioned earlier that there's a lot of anxiety. That's one of the reasons why there's a lot of anxiety is people don't have a very clear sense of meaning. They don't have a clear purpose. They don't have relationship. And so when you're missing those three things, you're not a very happy camper. As you see, just looking around and all the stuff going on around us. So I hope that answers the question. So
yeah, you're so good at answering it that I'm so overly involved in hearing your answer that I'm like, okay, I know I have to talk in a second, but like, what am I supposed to follow up right now? Because everything you say makes a lot of sense. And yes, I know I brought up things more related to metaphysical. I love both. I love the spirit and science of both things. If they can bridge and work together, that obviously works better for my human experience and just how really like limited my capacity really is as a human to try to understand these things that we can't talk about. But especially when I look over your background, I know that the left brain is 10 times more active in you than most people like would allow spiritual experiences to come in because they're like, oh, well, science hasn't proved that, so we're going to push that out. So I like presenting these things to you because I know you have a really good scientific background of how to not necessarily dismiss it, but maybe like correlate it or bridge it together where it's like, yes, this is possible. We don't really understand it. This is all we really have now. And near-death experiences, besides spiritual awakenings, are one of my favorite things if I can find people to talk about them, just because of the profound change that they have after it. You can still have a neurologist come in and tell you, just like you said, like, that's impossible, your brain is dead, chemicals, all of that stuff. But these people were so impacted by this that they changed.
And the people who really study this stuff seriously, they come away saying, those mechanical explanations just fall apart. And it's interesting too, because since 2000, a lot of our explanations for how life emerged and stuff have all fallen apart. They used to talk about the soup and all that stuff, but we could go on and on about reasons why that just doesn't work. And so biology is in a real crisis right now in terms of evolutionary theory to figure out where it all started. The DNA molecule is such an elegant molecule, but it's so complex, and there's so many things that need to support it in order for life to take place. And I don't want to get into a big scientific thing, but
I love it. We can just
I get fascinated by all that stuff.
I'm fascinated with it too, because I remember, I don't know how old I was, but it was just a random article that came out, and it told us that we have a very high percentage of our DNA, and it's just junk DNA. We don't really have to do that. And I'm not a scientist, and I certainly don't study it. But even as I read it, having zero background of that study, I was like, there's no way that it's junk. There's no way that there's nothing in there. And I think it's so easy for us to not understand something and just go, let's go away from it. But when you talk about anxiety and stress management, I think that is a supremely relatable topic for even the healthiest, happiest, and most successful person and all the way down the ladder.
And by the way, that junk DNA, they now realize it does have a purpose.
Yes, thank goodness we've continued the research.
Yeah, it's even the appendix, they figured out what the appendix is for. So
yeah,
I was always taught, it's just a vestigial thing. It's there, it gets infected. And
we just take it out.
Yeah, but it holds that bacteria. So when you have like diarrhea or something like that, it can reseed your intestine with the microbes that it needs to digest well.
That's
it's
interesting.
Just that sometimes
I did not know anything about the appendix besides my sister's got taken out when I was younger, and I remember if they didn't pull it out of her, it was going to explode. But it's fine. Your body can totally act without it.
That's like tonsils. Tonsils are kind of the guardians of your throat. But sometimes they lose the battle, so
mine lost the battle in 4th grade. I totally understand that.
Yeah.
So going back to some of the modalities that you used, I know that we referenced EMDR, and I want to pull that one apart. Lastly, are there other modalities that you favored to use based on your clients?
Well, I started out as a pretty straight cognitive behavioral person, so changing thought patterns, should must thinking, practicing behaviors, because especially with simple phobias, a behavioral approach works with those very well, where you come up with a hierarchy of things that the person avoids. You start with the simplest ones and you start to expose yourself to them. But at the same time, you have to manage the anxiety and the thoughts that are going on, so that they're managing that anxiety as they're exposing themselves. And as they get used to it, then it's like anything else. It's amazing what people can become used to with an exposure, a planned, a systematic approach. I mean, everybody, when they go to their first job, they're nervous, right? Mm-hmm. But now it's just, hey, it's just work. Mm-hmm. Because you've desensitized to it. So that process of desensitization is just all behaviorism is all about. And it works. And it's you do the same thing when you work with psychodynamic stuff. And that's basically what I was talking about when I was talking about looking at the background of the person and finding out what their core response patterns are. So let's say a person was in a very violent home, and when they objected to their parents, bad things happened, right? Well, I would speculate that one of the things that drive you is conflict is dangerous. Right? Absolutely. And so as an adult, they would complain, well, I don't understand why I don't speak up. I never give my opinion. I'm at the restaurant. My friend says I shouldn't order that, and so I just do it, even though I wanted to order it. And it's because there is this conflict of this dangerous response pattern that's kind of has a lot of different tentacles within their belief system and subconscious responses. And that's what psychodynamic approach basically deals with, is those unconscious things. It's amazing how unconscious we really are most of the day. We think we're aware of everything.
You took the next 2 questions out of my mouth. Keep going.
Yeah, no, I mean, you walk, right? You just walk down the sidewalk. Mm-hmm. Your brain is looking at distances. It's judging, keeping an eye out for things that might be dangerous, or also things that are good. And all this is taking place while you're thinking about, gee, what should I eat? I wonder what's on TV tonight, But just thousands of decisions your subconscious is handling. And that's good, because if I had to think about those things, I wouldn't be able to walk down the street, right? Mm-hmm,
like left, right, breathe. Yeah. Sometimes I joke that I have those moments.
Yeah.
So I recently went to a class where they were teaching meditation with PTSD. And they were talking about how we, on average, have about 50 to 60,000 thoughts a day. And in the beginning of, like, for example, someone in a healing process, going to therapy or whatever way they're going about helping their brain, bringing awareness to the fact that most of those are negative. How do you, I'm sure you can assess with somebody coming to therapy that's like, hey, I have these unconscious beliefs that are playing out in my everyday life. How do you redirect them to really empower them that they're able to stop this negativity in their head? How do you rebuild the neuroplasticity is probably the best way that I can say it.
Well, first of all, if we're talking about people that have PTSD or have different problems going on, the idea of most of those thoughts being negative, I could agree with that. But that's not true for everybody. Not everybody runs around with most of their thoughts being negative. Some people have mostly positive thoughts. Again, depending upon, their background, their belief system, their habit patterns, and personality, because personality plays a role in it as well. I lost your question there. How do you stop some of the negative thinking?
Yeah, how do you present it to your clients if you realize that this negative thinking pattern is what's blocking them from moving forward?
Well, the first step, again, this would be a cognitive behavioral approach, is to identify what are some of those negative thoughts that are coming up. And then you come up with specific counters to them. So if I'm dealing with maybe a more kind of a general response pattern, let's say I've got somebody who's got that conflict is dangerous programming, if you will, that they've learned that the world is dangerous, that I have no power, and so they act that. They don't think that. It's just a response pattern that's going on at an unconscious level. So the first thing you do is you put a label on it. Conflict is dangerous. Because if you have a label on it, now I have a way to think about it. If I don't have it labeled, I can't think about it. Then the next thing I do is I say, you need to have a simple explanation for when you act that way, that you can tell yourself, because people get caught up and do a lot of, I don't understand why, how come, why Why am I doing this? Why is this happening? I understand what's going on. Why is it happening? And that circular question that goes on, you have to stop so you can move on to, okay, what are you going to do about it? So a simple explanation and the example we're using might be, well, I grew up in a home where when I tried to assert myself, bad things, or spoke up, bad things happened to me. And so I learned that conflict is dangerous. It may be as simple as that, okay? Okay, now what do I do about it? So then I have them get very specific about, when does this type of response come up in your life? Well, let's see, it comes up at a restaurant when I want to order something and my mate says I shouldn't order it. It comes up at work when I don't speak up. At meetings, it comes up when I don't express my opinion. It comes up with my kids. I don't really like to be too forward with them. And then we say, okay, what are some things you can do that are opposite of those behavior patterns? Because when you want to change a negative behavior pattern, one of the things you do is you want to practice the opposite positive, okay? And so we come up with specific things to do, and then we say, okay, now we need to have some things you can tell yourself, I'm okay, what happened, like with PTSD stuff from the past as opposed to like military, and this does apply to some degree to that as well, is that's in the past. It's over. I'm not going to experience that again. I'm a different person. I have the ability to express myself, and reasonable people will accept me. I'm not going to get beat up or yelled at like I did when I was a kid. Because that's really what the person is responding. He's responding as if his parents are going to come out and beat him up or yell at him or whatever at that moment. And so I call it, what's happening, what's real. So when they start to feel or act that way and they catch themselves because they now have a label for it, say, okay, what's happening? I'm acting like that little kid who's afraid to speak up because something bad might happen to him. What's real is I'm an adult. Okay, I can speak up. I really want this dish, or I really would like to watch this program, or whatever it is, that they've come up with as their list of things they want to start practicing. And that's basically the general approach. So,
well, I think that's great. It's obviously easier to say you're going to do something, and then when you realize you actually have to put it into motion, the action is definitely harder. So helping pull that apart, especially for anybody that knows they have these negative thoughts that they need to overcome, or whatever pattern it is, we all have something. But you said that one of your favorite modalities to use was EMDR. Will you explain that to myself and the audience?
Well, it's called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And like a lot of stuff, there are a lot of theories about it, but we really don't know how it works. We've learned a lot about the brain and neurons and stuff, and we talk as if we really understand all this stuff. And there's a lot of levels of it that we really don't have a clue. But with EMDR, what you do is I'm very old-fashioned. They have light bars and all kinds of special things. I would just have people start to get a back and forth movement of the eyes. And when you sleep, your eyes have REM movement where they go back and forth. And we think, or at least one of the ideas, is that you're triggering whatever parts of the brain are active when you sleep, when you do that. Same thing with brain tapping and other things of that nature. And dreams are interesting because when you look at dreams, they have a variety of purposes. One of the things that happens when you dream is you consolidate information that you learned during the day. So if you learn how to solve problems or how to ski or something, and you dream about it, the next day you'll be better at it. I play guitar, and so if I got a new song I want to learn, I always find I play it and I think about it, especially if I think about it before I go to sleep, and then the next day when I wake up, I can play it better. It's just that memory consolidates, and so I have better access to it. So when trauma happens, and maybe talk a little bit about memory tags, the way the subconscious works is, and the way it sorts memories as to important or unimportant, is it puts emotional tags on them. So as you grow up and as things happen to you, memories will get an emotional tag. So, dog bit me here. So these are things I did that probably should have an emotional tag. Things that aren't very emotional one way or the other, positive, negative, they just are kind of information, which is why book learning is not as good as experience. I can learn everything I need to know about driving a car, but until I get behind the wheel and start doing it, that's when your subconscious now can start to tag, that was not a good thing to do. oh, this is cool. Do this. And now that becomes an automatic response pattern because your memory, your brain can access those memories through those tags that it's put on. So when trauma happens, and again, a lot of this is speculative, we don't know for sure, but it seems that you get this really big tag put on sensory stuff. So if I'm in a car accident, the sights, the sounds, the smells, everything that was taking place at that time gets tagged as dangerous. And so now when I encounter that, I go on alert because the danger has been associated with those particular sensory things. And sometimes you're not even aware of what it is. For example, I had one client who was reacting at work to this certain person, and they got really nervous around him, even though he was a nice person, and until they realized that, this person looks and sounds exactly like my dad.
Oh, that's a big revelation to have.
Oh, yeah. And so she started using the what's happening, what's real approach. This person is not my dad. They're just a person. And they're not going to yell at me. They're not going to do bad things to me. And she desensitized, and they actually became friends. So these types of reactions we have with trauma again can be very powerful. And what happens is the thinking part of your brain shuts off. And it's like whenever you become strongly emotional, the rational part of your brain kind of shuts down and you kind of go on automatic pilot. So these different technologies like EMDR and stuff, what they're trying to do is to connect the thinking part of your brain while you're in that memory. And so you have the person do this, you have them recall different events. Some of them will be the trauma or some precursors to it. And you can actually see when they stop processing. And when it's done well, afterwards, what was a very powerful emotional experience or memory just becomes a memory. It's like the knife gets pulled out of the heart. In PTSD, they say, you don't forget, but you don't have to always remember. And that's kind of what the goal that you're working towards. And it's amazing. When it works well, a person will come in the next session after you've dealt with something that was really bothering them, and you'll say, so how'd that go this week? Oh, I forgot all about it. So, and that's what you've done it well. And the one thing that's missing in a lot of EMD treatments that are done is they'll do the tracking, they'll get the memories, they'll get the precursors and stuff, but they don't do a rehearsal. One of the things that I found that was very important is after we did all that stuff, then I'd have them think about, okay, what are the tools you can use, for example, with anxiety or like that what's happening, what's real thing with the guy at work. Now, I want you to imagine yourself at work, and I want you to see yourself have that reaction happen, and then you catch yourself and you say, no, wait a minute, he's just a person at work. And you calm down. And you run through that a bunch of times, and so they're kind of basically going through desensitization in their mind. And I find that's the element that's missing in a lot of EMDR work. And that's why a lot of times it's not very effective.
That would make a lot of sense too, because even like whether you're going to go into the grocery store, you're going to a meeting, or like you said, work, you're already picturing how it's going to go before you go in. So I think...
Well, and again, you're rehearsing it while you've got full ability of your thinking matter.
So it's a really good integration technique?
Right, because one of the things you try to do, now, and I used to use hypnosis when I was early on in practice, and I decided that the EMDR was better. And occasionally you would see somebody start to age regress, and you say, no, wait a minute, you're just sitting here in my office. It's just 2023. We're just thinking about this. And so you want to keep one foot anchored in the present, one foot anchored in the rational part of their brain while they're dealing with this memory, from the past that has this strong emotional tag to it.
Yeah, that is really powerful.
And that allows those two to connect. So now the rational part of their brain will click in when that thing gets triggered. And that's how they can, that's what seems to be the thing that allows them to be sensitized to it.
Have you experienced your clients getting any form of cognitive dissonance from just digging through their own traumas?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how you mean that. Maybe tell me what you mean by that.
I'm trying to think of an example because I realize that's kind of a broad question when I say that with how many people that you've had. So cognitive dissonance, usually when new information is introduced into your core beliefs or what you believed happened, right? So I know it disconnects critical thinking, and I'm trying not to do it.
Yeah, I'm thinking in terms of somebody who's a doctor who smokes. He knows smoking is not good for him, and so he's kind of in denial to it. And yet, cognitive dissonance kind of comes in when he starts to really face the fact that, I got this habit pattern, but I'm not doing anything about it. And so, that creates a tension, and so you either have to resolve it by taking action, doing something, or you go in denial basically over it.
Like
you start
stay in
dismissing
denial over and over.
Yeah, and so in that sense, people. So especially with parents, a lot of times it's hard to take a look at some of the negative things that happen to them in life, and to just accept that, that really happened to me, and it wasn't my fault. I was just a kid. And those types of things should not happen to a child. And so you can get a lot of refusal and difficulty in accepting that in some cases, and I've run into that a lot. So.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, being that person sitting in your office and having to go through these things that I obviously know are holding some part of me back in my present self, but how difficult it still would be to visit them and go and try to understand and somewhat release them.
Well, and typically, it's not like you dive into everything all at once. When things are ready to be dealt with, they come up. And if it's just too much for you to deal with, your brain is you're just going to block it off and not allow you to even get into it.
Not today.
Yeah, so, you just start pecking away at it, and, you pull the string, and one thing will lead to another, and it'll come up as it needs to come up. And that's been my experience. I mean, people who try to bulldoze in and take everything out at once, then that's not good.
Does destabilization happen? Would that be...
Say again?
Destabilization, can that happen if you try to dig into everything at one time?
Yeah, and I want people to stay intact. For when you're dealing like with PTSD type of stuff, I would talk about, it's a dance between processing and containment. If you're at work and school and stuff, you need to be contained. So you have to have good tools so that you're not thinking about that stuff and you're not processing at those moments so that you can function in life. And yet at the same time, you have to take time where you're actually processing it, whether that's journaling at night, coming into your therapy session or whatever. Because if you don't process it, it is going to come up when you don't want it to. So it's kind of that dance between, you want to process, but you want to kind of keep it on balance between that and your ability to contain stuff. So if you get overwhelmed, then it's really hard to just function.
Which again, tapping is a really good way for you to self-regulate. Are there any other things that you recommend out of the office for if they come up on a trigger?
Most of the stuff I dealt with was more cognitive behavioral stuff, self-talk. I did routinely give people a relaxation response tape, and it would have a trigger where they would put their two fingers and thumb together. And the suggestion would be when you put your two fingers and thumb together, you get a relaxation response. And as you practice doing that over time, it actually does work. And I liked it because you could be in the grocery store and you could be putting stuff in your bag and stuff and have your fingers together. And still do that. It's not like holding your ear or doing something unusual. It's a very
swiping the top meridian line at the checkout.
Yeah. It's a very inconspicuous type of thing to do. And and that came out of my old hypnosis practice days. When I was doing that. But I found it to be very useful. In fact, it even works. I've got up on my website some pregnancy tapes I use with my wife. And we had a relaxation response. So if I would touch her shoulder or knee and say the word relax, she would relax. So after contractions, I would say, okay, relax. I remember our first gynecologist, she said, does this stuff work? Oh, yeah, watch. So relax. Okay. Oh, yeah. It's nice and relaxed. Okay.
Where were you when I had a baby? I could have used that.
Speeds up the process. So,
Yeah.
So yes. So these types of things, and it's just a straight conditioned response, thing that you're doing with people, but they're very effective. And you tie that in with the self-talk. And like with anxiety disorders, like with panic attacks, you work with things like distraction, finding things to focus on, things of that nature, breathing techniques, the military breathing, the inhale out through your mouth slowly type of thing. So that whole collection of things together seems to work.
Yep,
And some
just
people
pick
find
which
some
one works for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have written down on my notes from the last time we talked, it says, "Are you living the label question mark?" What does that mean?
People would come in and say, "So why are you here?" "Well, I have panic disorder, I'm codependent," and they start rattling off all these things, right? And so I'd say, "So what does that mean?" "Well, I don't know."
I'm here.
Yeah. And a lot of times when people get a label, then they start living it. "Well, I'm anxiety disorder, so that means I can't do this, I can't do that. Anxiety disorder is gone." And so anxiety disorder becomes like the way, the lens that they look out through their life. And one of the things that I really try to stress with people is you need to normalize yourself. You're a normal person. With panic disorder as a group, they have reactive bodies. Everything's on an old normal curve. Some people have very reactive bodies. Other people, you got to slap them upside the head to notice something, right? People that I worked with were a cool group because they had these reactive bodies, which made them more sensitive, more intuitive, because they had more information coming in. So they're fun people to work with. And I used to tell them, yeah, it's driving you nuts with your panic attacks, but it's the quality that your kids, your mate, your friends, your coworkers, that they really like about you, because you notice things, you empathize well. You're a real softening quality in a very harsh world. And so it's something to be, treasured. You just got to learn to not be overwhelmed by it. Realize that you're in a world of insensitive clods and you're a sensitive person.
Mm-hmm.
Because we think everybody else is just like me, right?
One of my biggest things too. Yeah, I mean, not treating it like it's a curse. It really is a gift, but knowing how to utilize it and just really, I don't want to be like, put your bubble out, but I'm a big put my bubble out type person. I'll still be a big hugger, but this is my space, this is my energy, and
all right.
I don't want people coming into it stinking it up. I work really hard to be happy as much as possible, and even if I have those low days, I still just ride that wave.
Yeah. Well, one of the most rewarding things that when I was going to the conferences is I had a group back in Virginia that was using the book, and they all showed up and they had these buttons saying, "So I'm anxious." They all had panic disorder, right? And it was fun talking to them because they'd say, I got a presentation tomorrow. I'm probably not going to sleep tonight, but I'll sleep good the next night. And so they come to just accept that that's just how I'm wired, and it's just a normal variation. There's nothing wrong with the way I am. Yeah, it has a label. I have panic attacks, and I used to have agoraphobia and avoid things and stuff. But now I realize I'm just a sensitive, anxious person at times, and it's okay. It's normal. There's nothing to be. It's nothing that I have to let it ruin my life. So that normalizing, I think, became an important thing. I found it was really important to get people to trust their own opinion. I used to tell people, think of me kind of like a used car salesman. You're telling me stuff, I'm making guesses based upon my experience, and hey, I can guess wrong and I can be way totally off. You need to process it through your own brain, your own experience, and decide, is it reasonable or not? That's something I find people don't do enough. They give everything over to experts nowadays, and they don't ask themselves, does this even sound reasonable? It's like when I was teaching math, some kid would do a problem, and so let's see, how much does that cost? Oh, that's $10,800,000 for eggs. Okay, does that sound reasonable to you? Let's go back and rework the problem, right?
Yeah, that's a really good example though too, because so often you're right. A lot of people are like, "Oh, they're an expert in their field."
Yeah.
They must know more about me.
Oh, and there's a lot of nonsense out there.
Yes, there is. And I think presenting it to yourself, for me, it's like presenting it into your intuition. And like, I'm a really big like feeling and resonance person, especially the more that I get into connecting like the mind, body, and spirit mysteries, which is why this show exists and you're here with me today, because you have a piece to that science puzzle that I like to add in there. But really that resonance on, even if I'm sitting in front of an expert, And I love everything that they're saying.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean that everything that they're saying at that point is for me in that time. So I have to go and I have to pick out what's for me at the time and what's going to help me. And maybe if it's not for me, it'll come back down the road later and I'll get to utilize it at a higher octave of myself.
Yeah, I always use the old analogy of the elephant and the blind man, where the guy that's got the trunk thinks it's a snake, and the guy that's got the ear thinks it's a fan. Guy that's got the side and feeling the side of it, he thinks it's a wall. All of them are correct, but none of them are actually seeing the whole picture, and that's oftentimes the way it is. Yeah, I do have a very strong faith side to me, and the science side of me was always interesting as a therapist, because most therapists come out of the soft sciences. They come out of social science and that type of stuff, and coming out of it from a behavioral side, it was always fun just to ask people, so why is that true? Why? I would just ask questions. It was fun how often I would find somebody who had no idea why they were believing or doing what they were doing, because they didn't have any strong framework to work out of.
I think you just described my job, is just asking people why they do the things they do, believe the things that they believe, and would they mind sharing it with me in a non-judgmental format.
And unfortunately, we're living at a time when people are so inundated with sensory stuff, they don't really take time to think these things through and figure out, what is it that I believe and why am I doing this? And they're just kind of reacting from all the stuff that's coming in from all the different sources and stuff. I think that's one of the most destructive things nowadays is people don't have quiet time. People used to have a lot of time to think and to reflect and to just, become centered into what they believe and feel and, what their goals and stuff are. Nowadays, we're just constantly on overload. And it's, So when you start asking people, why are you doing that? What is that all about? A lot of times they end up in a blind alley. They have no idea.
Yeah, I tend to sometimes ask too deep of questions, but sometimes I really struggle with surface level conversation because I've been intrigued with deeper things from a very young age. So if you want to sit and have a conversation about, what's your favorite TV show now, I probably look like a really just disassociated, introverted conversationalist, when really I'm dying to know other things, but I don't know if we're close enough to ask. So how do I open this conversation?
I'm right there with you. Well, when I was talking with when I was dealing with people with social phobia, we talk about the three things you always talk to a stranger about, right? You can talk about the weather, you can talk about a current news event, or you can talk about something, the common experience. Gee, that plant's kind of interesting. This line is awfully long. And that's how you get started. And
very true.
But that is surface, yeah. But
there has to be an introductory level. You can't run into somebody at the bank and be like, what was one instance in your life that just really traumatized you and changed your perspective on life?
You need to have some level of intimacy before you can speak deeply into a person's life. So yeah, that's true.
Absolutely. So veering back over to your book, because I definitely want to I don't want to give the book away, right? I want people to buy it from you. But when you talk about why you even labeled it, why you feel the way you do, just blanket statement out there.
I've been fascinated with emotions ever since I saw Spock on Star Trek.
That's funny.
And my junior year of high school, kids used to refer to me as Spock, so I had the little sideburns and everything. So I was just science. I was Mr. Science and logical and all that. Anyway,
you are, but you have such a good personality too.
Well, that's because I got into music, And when I got into college, the blues was the big things, and soul and feeling it, So I got into, you got to have soul, you got to feel it,
Oh yeah, music's my favorite healing modality.
It helped to balance things out.
Yes,
sure. Forget where I was going with that, but yeah.
No, you're fine. You're talking about how you're inspired by studying emotions.
The book. So the book basically has, it's like all my thinking and all the stuff I've been interested in about emotions I've put in there. So I start with, actually a journey on 4 sections. And the first section is, what are emotions and why do we have them? And there's just so much fascinating stuff that's come out with the new affective neuroscience as to those emotional circuits and how they work, and some of the studies that have been gone on in New Zealand and stuff. And then I talk about simple triggers and how to work with them. We've talked a little bit about that today. And then core response patterns, we talked a little bit about that today. And then the last section is the 3 things that make people happy that positive psychology, the so-called science of happiness, have discovered. And that's fairly new. That actually started right in just before 2000. There was a big conference, a psychological conference, and the main speaker said that, we've spent a lot of time looking at disorders. We need to start doing some research on what makes people happy and successful. And that kind of kicked off a lot of that interest in it, even though some had been going on here and there beforehand. So now there's just a lot of people doing all kinds of research and what makes people happy. So that's the last couple chapters. So it's kind of a little journey I take people through.
Little journey you take. Do you tell short stories in it? Do you give any tips and tricks?
Yeah, there's a lot of stories. I find examples are the best way to understand concepts. Mm-hmm. At the end of each chapter, I have a list of key concepts, and then I have a set of recommended activities. So it's actually a workbook. So if somebody wants to go through and do the exercises, they'll discover a lot about themselves. Now, you can just read it and get a lot of information, too, and some people want to do that. But I'm a teacher at heart. I've always been a teacher. And so, I used to teach guitar, and I taught, before I got my master's, I taught secondary education, taught over in Japan for a couple of years. So that's my books always have a teaching element in them at the end of the chapter.
I think you have to know if you want to be a teacher. Some people just really don't have it in it, and then I meet people that are just so passionate about it, and I think it's just so admirable. And I mean, you brought up music. I was going to leave it alone, but here we are. What guitar or guitars do you have and play?
Well, I play a Strat now. I used to play a 335 B.B. King's guitar because I liked him. But it's a heavy guitar. My back's not what it used to be, and so I went to something lighter. And I play mainly in church right now. I mean, I have another guy we play with, and we call ourselves Still Kickin'. Because he's older than I am. So
Still Kickin'? That's your band name?
Yeah.
I absolutely love that.
Mostly 60s rock, Creedence Clearwater, Beatles, that type of stuff. But
you're naming off my whole record collection.
Yeah. But, we do, I do a lot of church music, so I do services every Sunday. So I'm the lead guitar for that, so I add the color to whatever we're doing.
That's amazing. You have such an interesting life.
It's fun. Yeah.
And it's so your curiosities have played out well with your education and all of the left brain rabbit holes that you've went down. But I love all the information that you're able to present to us. And I hope that whoever hears this episode, one, thank you for listening, but they also pick a copy of your book up, and it adds just delight, vitality, and happiness to their life.
Well, that's something I've always wanted, is just have people get a little happier. Alfred Adler, he had a concept that I learned early on, that sometimes it just takes a little change to make a big difference. Sometimes you don't have to tear the whole house down and rebuild it. You just need to do a little bit of remodeling here and there, and that makes the difference that you need.
That's a great outro to the episode. Mm-hmm. It really is. Besides telling everybody where they can find you. They always know the description below, there's a connect tab, so any links up, any books that we can buy you, but is there anything that you would like to tell them?
The central place is whyemotions.com, so whyemotions.com. That's my website. I've got links to my YouTube videos and to Amazon, and the book's out in audio as well as, in fact, most of my books are in audio as well as paper and Kindle.
Did you do the audio on it, or did you have somebody else do it?
No, I let Nightingale do that. So
that's fine. I was just curious if I could hear your voice more.
Well, just replay this episode.
Yes, perfect. Perfect. You seriously have one of the best sense of humors I've seen for someone in your field. Truly.
Yeah, thank you.
I love that you credit the music. Music's my big thing. So
It does my sense of humor does get me in trouble sometimes.
you and me both.
I've learned that I don't have to say everything that's going on inside my head.
You know, they told me that when I was a kid and I didn't believe them, and now I think they're right. Don't tell them. I know they're right, but direct experience is our best teacher. That's what I read in a book, and now I tell everybody now for the way that I talk and the way that I help.
Yeah. I've got a small group that I'm part of, and we've been meeting for over 20 years now. And this one lady was talking about this place she went to, and I'll never forget these 4 things that this person said. And the first one was this, and the second was this, third one, don't remember the fourth one. But I'll never forget those 4 things they said. And it's like, so my mind immediately says, well, except the fourth one. So
except the fourth one. I read something yesterday that said you can't remember more than 4 things at a time.
Well, it depends whether you chunk them or not. So yes, 5 to 7 chunks usually is what you can remember. So
I can remember lyrics, my grocery list, and when to pick up my daughter. And then I have all my library of studies behind me besides all the other courses that I take besides this show.
Memory with lyrics and music is amazing to me. I've forgotten more music than I know how to play, and yet we'll be there and somebody will play a few bars of something, and it's like, whoa, it clicks on.
Comes right back. Yeah, I am in the midst of relearning piano, and when I sat down, I just had to breathe for a minute because it had been so long. And I went back to the songs that I used to write when I was younger and I played. Right. Because I was like, oh God, I hope I didn't remember them. And I just found a couple chords. Yep. And I am like, where is this stored? This blows my mind that I'm still able to recoup these memories. I wrote the song I was playing today before I got on with you. I wrote it when I was 14 or 15. And I'm still keying it out the rest of it. But I'm like, I am just so glad that this didn't go away.
Well, 14, 15 probably has a fairly strong emotional tag on it.
It does, yes.
Yeah, you got all that adolescent angst going on, so.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't angsty. I really wanted it to feel kind of country-y at the time. Yeah. They have, a lot of A chords in there to get that just kind of like a church feel the higher you go up the range. But it was definitely inspired by a lot of things that happen in our community at the time. When somebody passes away in a small town, the whole community bands together and we grieve together and we do all of that. And writing and music were 2 of the things where I could express what I was observing from other people and the feelings in myself. So
and that's what we've
sat down
lost
and I
nowadays.
wrote that.
We've lost that community. We don't have it.
Well, I'm right here, bud, so you tell them where to find me because those are my 2 things, writing and music. And I think that they're divine and I think they're ancient. So I'm here to normalize them and bring them back and show some music in the meantime. So I wish you all the best of luck with all of your research, all of your books and everything. It has been an absolute delight to talk to you. All the information you gave me and the audience, I really, really, really appreciate it. I learned from everybody, so my thank yous are just on and on and on and on sometimes.
Well, I thank you for inviting me. It's always a lot of fun here.
It is. Well, before you get out of here, folks, as usual, we'll end this episode with, let's see. I picked out Serenity by Neovaii today off of his album Horizon. Don't forget, Vitality Exposed brings you this music, so make sure you go check her out or hire her for your next concert engagement. We'll see you on the next episode. Love you guys.
This is the Hoosier Media Network, your home for podcasting.